parce que je suis dans un autre call en même temps. Euh, bon, c'est un webinar, donc pourquoi la parole est à moi?
Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session on the Safe Water Optimization Tool. My name is Syed Imran Ali. I'm the lead on the SWAT project, what we call it for short. And with me today is Mr. James Brown, who's our field technical advisor on the project. In today's session, what we'd like to do is introduce you to the SWAT, a new web-based data analytics tool that helps water supply teams generate site-specific and evidence-based water chlorination targets. These targets help to ensure that water remains safe to drink all the way from the tap to the last cup consumed in people's homes. Today, what we like to do is give a quick overview of how the SWAT works, the problem that it solves, and let you know how you can get started using it too. Version 1 of the tool is already live on the internet now, so you can head over to the URL at safeh2o.app to get started. We're here to help people use the tool in the field, and we're already working on a version 2 based on the feedback we've received from field users, but more on that later. Now today, what we'd like to do is in this 60-minute session is in the first half, James will walk us through a quick overview of the basics of the SWAT. We're going to talk about what is a problem that the SWAT is here to help solve, how does it work, and what kind of input data does it need, a quick walkthrough of the web tool. James will tell you a bit about the development roadmap of ours, going from version 1, the prototype, to version 2 that we're building now with user feedback, and version 3 in the future, and how you can start using the tool as well. Now, in the second half of the presentation, we'd like to open it up for a Q&A session and discussion with you. We would like to handle any questions you might have on technical or practical matters related to the tool, but more importantly, we'd like to have the opportunity to learn from you and find out what are the features and functionalities and changes that would add value, be useful to the WASH sector. What kind of support would the WASH sector individual agencies need to start using the SWAT, and how you could see it fitting into your programs either at the agency level or at the cluster level. How can it become part and parcel of the ways of working in the sector? So with that, I'd like to hand it over to James, who will walk us through the basics of the SWAT. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Imran. So firstly, let's talk about the issue that the SWAT has been developed to solve. So globally, chlorination is the most widely used form of water treatment, and it's particularly suited to humanitarian contexts because of its ability to provide lasting protection from recontamination. However, ensuring that this residual protection is sufficient to ensure water safety along the water chain is really challenging. So it's usual practice to be able to monitor FRC levels after 30 minutes of contact time and to follow up with monitoring at the tap stand. But what happens after water is collected, transported home, and stored before consuming? Even if water is considered safe at the collection point, we often don't know whether the residual protection is sufficient to prevent recontamination before drinking. In fact, we know that chlorine decay after distribution can be significant and rapid. Unlike the initial chlorine demand of the raw water or the decay that occurs during distribution, the rate of post-distribution decay is really challenging to model. It depends on factors related to the environment, to raw water quality, and even users' behavior that are really site-specific and not well understood. And it's not just a question of adding more chlorine. A chlorine dose that's too small results in the risk of recontamination, but too much chlorine can lead to acceptance issues around taste and odor. So the sphere standard for water quality is that water is palatable and of sufficient quality for drinking and cooking and for personal and domestic hygiene without causing risk to health. And depending on the context, the margins for achieving this standard may be really quite slim. So we need good models as well as monitoring tools with which to determine the effective dosing. And the SWOT has been developed to respond to exactly this need. So the impetus for this project was research conducted by MSF in South Sudan during the hepatitis outbreak in 2013. And they found that even when the globally agreed targets for FRC were achieved at tap stands, FRC levels were not sufficient to protect the water to the point of consumption after being stored in the home. In 2013, I was actually part of a WASH team working on water supplies to camps in Maban. And I can say from experience how challenging it was to balance the need for protective FRC levels with issues of acceptability, particularly during that outbreak. So in South Sudan, MSF started to create models to predict the decay rate of FRC post-distribution. These models could be used to adjust chlorine dosing to maximize the duration of the protection. They showed that it was possible to achieve up to 10 hours of protection for stored water by increasing the chlorine dosing. Improvements beyond this would require additional interventions to protect safe water chain. But this modeling was specific to the context. It couldn't be applied to other responses that were facing the same challenges. And it's not always possible to carry out the kind of in-depth research that MSF deployed to South Sudan. So the idea for the Safe Water Optimization tool was to take this learning from South Sudan and to use it to develop a web service that could carry out similar modeling on demand for any response based on data that WASH teams were already collecting from the field. So the SWOT allows field teams anywhere to access the advanced analytics required to model FRC decay simply by uploading FRC monitoring data. The SWOT returns site-specific, evidence-based FRC targets that can be used directly to adapt and maintain water quality optimized at the point of use. So the SWOT is a tool that manages to hide some quite advanced and innovative data analytics behind an interface that's designed to be as simple and as user-friendly as possible. So the SWOT requires a minimum of 100 paired samples to provide an accurate FRC recommendation. Each paired sample consists of a timed measurement of FRC and optionally water temperature and conductivity measurements taken from the tap stand, followed by a second measurement of FRC from the same water supply at the household after a set time. The SWOT takes this data, models the FRC decay, and provides a target FRC level to deliver at the tap stand in order to achieve the residual protection over a specified storage time. So the analysis is carried out using two approaches in parallel. Firstly, the numerical modeling of chlorine decay, and secondly, using machine learning and artificial neural networks. The results of these analyses are compared internally and cross-checked to ensure consistency and accuracy. The numerical modeling approach is presented and demonstrated. We demonstrated application to a multi-site study in South Sudan, Jordan, and Rwanda in a paper that has recently been published in the journal Water Research. Artificial neural networks are a type of machine learning algorithm that can be trained on real-world data to model outputs based on a range of different inputs. The advantage of using this approach is that it's possible to combine several different types of data in addition to FRC. So currently we can use water temperature and conductivity measures from the tap stand to dial in the analysis. But in the future, this could be expanded to account for different water quality parameters, environmental data, or even water handling practices. The write-up of the ANN approach has been accepted into the Nature partner journal, Clean Water, and it's currently in press. So the links to all these research papers are available on the SWOT website, which is safeh2o.app. So now for a quick demonstration of what this looks like using the tool. So the SWOT is designed to be as lightweight as possible in terms of providing clear, actionable, site-specific information to users based on the minimum amount of routine data in. So we have a simple template spreadsheet available to download for collecting paired samples. This is available online. So here you can see each row of the spreadsheet is one paired sample containing fields for the date and time of the tap stand sample, along with FRC temperature and conductivity measurements. And then we have corresponding date and time of the household sample with a second FRC reading. So this information is uploaded to the SWOT tool as an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file and assigned to a field site. There are a few options for the analysis, most importantly, setting the maximum duration of household storage that you'd like to analyze. And there are other configurations that can be done on the analysis. Once the file is submitted for processing, it takes a few minutes to run the analysis, after which the results are emailed to you. So the system is set up to work asynchronously to help deal with unreliable internet access. So after the report is emailed to you, this is a sample of what it would look like. So the report contains both a recommendation around FRC target that can be used as a benchmark for tap stand monitoring, and a summary of the FRC data submitted, which can be used for reporting. So here you can see the results from a data set collected in Bangladesh, showing the target FRC at tap stands should be 0.9 milligrams per liter in order to provide 15 hours of protection. So once the data has been processed and you've got the results, these results are stored in your user account. So you're able to view and manage water quality across several different sites. So how does this all fit in with your existing water quality monitoring? So there are several ways to integrate the SWOT analysis into water quality monitoring. These are a couple of examples we've thought of. I'm sure there are many more, and we're excited about exploring those. But firstly, you could include some household level monitoring as part of your routine daily tap stand monitoring. So with this scenario, we would recommend about 2 teams of 2 monitoring assistants for a site of up to 50,000 people, working part-time on data collection. That's about 4 or 6 hours a day. They could collect enough paired samples to provide an updated FRC target every 4 to 6 weeks. Alternatively, the data collection could be integrated into larger periodic assessments or monitoring sessions, adding tap stand monitoring components to household surveys or water use audits. So in this case, assuming the same camp of 50,000 people, 5 teams of 2 data collection enumerators could collect sufficient paired samples to prepare a new FRC target in about 1 to 2 weeks, and repeat this process every 3 or 6 months. The SWOT chlorination recommendation adapts to changing conditions in the field as more data is collected. And we know that chlorine decay rates can be highly seasonal, and so it's a good idea to periodically update the analysis at different times of the year. The SWOT is designed for situations where there is a significant amount of time between collecting the water from a chlorinated source and consuming it. So this is really common, obviously, in humanitarian settings where there's no piped water in people's homes or where supplies are broken or unreliable. And to date, it's been used and tested with centralized chlorination in piped water networks. But we're really keen to apply it to other contexts, such as water trucking, where you have hand pump dosing, or even household treatment, household chlorination. So where are we in the development process? So as Imran said at the beginning, version 1 of the tool is now live and it's ready to use. It was formally launched in November after about 20 months of development and testing, mainly in Bangladesh, Nigeria, and Tanzania. The 6-month pilot study, especially in Bangladesh with MSF, found that using the SWOT chlorination recommendations roughly doubled the proportion of households having access to safe water up to 15 hours after collection. That's compared to using the standard SPHERE guidelines for chlorination at the tap stand. And this study is formally being written up at the moment. So although the results so far from version 1 and from all that testing have given us a lot of confidence in the effectiveness of the tool, we're currently preparing version 2 for release in June. So this update is going to focus on improvements to the usability of the tool and expanding the feature set to make sure that users get the most value out of the data that they're collecting. So this has involved a lot of work, both on the design and the user interface side, as well as on the data processing side. And to give you a bit of a snapshot on what we're working on, this is a wireframe from the results visualization page. So you'll see we've really tried to bring that data to life and allow you to see at a top line exactly what's going on with the data that you've supplied. It's our hope that these improvements will really allow the SWOT to be integrated better into the way that water quality is being both monitored and reported. So in one site, across multiple sites, and even across different organizations. So looking further forward, there are already improvements that we have identified for a potential version 3. We're working on developing a rapid protocol for understanding thresholds of chlorine taste and odor acceptability. And we're looking at ways to monitor disinfection byproducts in drinking water. And this is also an opportunity for making further iterative improvements and developments based on feedback and based on that user testing. So if you're interested in learning more, testing out the web tool or starting to use a SWOT in a field site, go ahead. It's ready to go. We've got an experienced support team who can walk you through the process of getting set up. We'll soon be sharing a quick start guide and briefing materials to share with colleagues in the field. The tools are all free to use and open source. You don't need any specialist equipment beyond simple water testers, and we can help with fitting the data collection into your routine monitoring. If you're interested, we're also looking for partners to help support a further study to formally evaluate the effectiveness in the field. That's with HIF funding and with Tufts University. This would include getting involved in some of the research to understand taste and odor perceptions, looking at further ways to simplify data collection and that identification of disinfection byproducts in treated water. So there are many opportunities to get involved, but our main drive is really to get this tool out there, supporting field teams and helping you to provide quality water. We're really excited to see where this is going to develop from here. So thank you. Over to you, Imran.
Thank you very much, James, for that brilliant walkthrough of the basics of the SWOT. Now, what we'd really like to do in this session, we have about 40 minutes, I'm really pleased for that, is have an opportunity to have a discussion with all the experienced folks who are in the room joining us today. There's a couple of things that we would like to prompt for this discussion. First off, if there are any technical or practical questions, please add them in the chat box and James and I will get to them one by one. But we'd really like to take this opportunity also to put a question to the audience as WASH practitioners, as people delivering safe water supply projects in the field, understanding the initiatives in the sector to improve quality of interventions and the public health impact of our interventions. How can we make the SWOT maximally useful and add value to the field? So we'd like to ask, what kind of new features, functionalities or changes can we bring to the SWOT that would help you deliver your mission in the field? what kind of support you feel you would need to get started using the SWOT, and are there any specific barriers that you see that we can help address? And then how could the SWOT fit into programs either at the agency specific level or at the cluster level? How can we mainstream this tool into the ways of working of the sector? So I really like to open it up to the whole group to ask questions or add comments on any of these topics. So please go ahead and add it into the chat box, and James and I will get to them. As people are formulating their questions and typing them in, I'd just like to give a few acknowledgements to the folks who've been involved in building the tool and the agencies that have been supporting us in developing it. There's a huge number of people who have been involved in developing this tool at York University in Toronto, Canada, as well as MSF, based in the Netherlands, and many, many other people who have been involved in different aspects of the analytics, research and development, in the implementations in the field, the support to field teams, in the design and development of the web tool, and in coordination and advisory on the project. So there's many people there to name. I've put their names on the screen. And I'd also like to thank our research and development funders. Those are the Acmea Foundation, Grand Challenges Canada, Humanitarian Grand Challenge Initiative, and HIF ELRA. So thank you all for your really wonderful support. So I see some questions starting to come in the chat box now. So what I'll do is, James, can you move back to that prompt screen? We'll leave the prompts up on the screen so folks can have a reflect on those. There's a question from Mariangela Dadamo at UNICEF. I'm just going to read it out. Hello, thanks for the presentation. Is a computer processing calculation getting more and more accurate with the number of samples taken? If yes, which is approximately the critical number of samples to be entered to have a reliable prediction? So this is a question that I can handle. So the way we have designed the analytics is to be site specific at this stage. So the data that we collect at a particular site informs a recommendation for that specific site. Based on our research so far, we've seen that you need about a minimum, about 100 paired samples. We can collect that usually within 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks of data collection in the field to generate a functionable, actionable FRC target recommendation. The more data you add, the stronger that the confidence level is in that recommendation. And more importantly, as conditions change in the field, and we know chlorine decay is controlled by temperature, by water handling practices, all sorts of things in the field. As the conditions change, the latest data will also change, and then the recommendation will adapt to the latest conditions in the field. So that's what we're doing right at the moment. The data is very site specific. However, as we expand to multiple sites around the world, there's an opportunity to use a machine learning to figure out what are the general trends across sites. We're not at that stage yet. We don't have enough data yet from multiple sites, but it's something that we're starting to experiment with now that we've done about 3 implementations with the SWOT. From there, we'll be able to develop new techniques to bootstrap analytics. You might be able to use data from similar sites, temperature and hygiene condition wise, to help quickly generate an initial recommendation even before the 100 samples come in. We're still experimenting with how to do that, but there's a lot of insight we can gather from multiple sites to inform a new site. We're working on those now. So I hope that answers your question, Maria Angela, and thank you. That's a fantastic question.
Yes, thanks a lot. It was very clear. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks. There's a question here from Tabata. So I don't understand if there's already a phone app for it. Probably that could help in the to improve the process of data collection. So at the moment, it's a web-based app. So it can be accessed through a mobile phone. It can be accessed through a laptop. You need obviously internet connection to get that, to upload the data and to configure the analysis. In terms of data collection, yes, in version 2 and version 3, we're hoping to have a direct integration with some mobile data collection tools, so something like Kobo, and being able to pull data directly through from a Kobo survey into the tool, so you can avoid that upload step. So that's definitely something we're looking at. Thank you.
I just add to that that we have templates available for Kobo, for instance. We can create them for other mobile data collection platforms as well. So field users can use whatever data collection method they're comfortable with using in the field. We can create the templates and surveys, provide that to the field, and then you can simply export the data out of your existing data collection platform directly into the SWOT. Okay, I see a question here from Jenny Lam. Are you able to provide some perspectives of the country examples of how this data was also correlated and analyzed with household behaviors and their water containers? More specifically, how long they store it before they drink it, considering any taste issues with 0.9 milligrams per liter FRC, and if they have clean and covered water containers. Any insights, reflections, welcome. So that's a fantastic question. You know, we've been doing the underlying research and development for the SWOT, going back to that original hepatitis C outbreak in South Sudan in 2013. Then that was quite intensive data collection. We asked very, very broad questions relating to environmental conditions, water quality parameters, water handling behaviors, other contextual factors. It's very rich data collection. And we repeated that then in Jordan and Rwanda as well, and to a smaller degree in Tanzania. So we have some research that is due to come out this year looking at what factors influence the safe water chain. And that will help inform our later iterations of the SWOT. However, for the SWOT as it exists now, one imperative that we wanted to meet was to minimize the data collection burden on the field. We didn't want to ask field users to collect additional kinds of data, particularly as part of routine monitoring. So we really kept it to the bare minimum to make it lightweight as possible. When we did our analyses of those huge data sets we had in South Sudan, Jordan, and Rwanda, we found that the most important variables were FRC at the tap stand, at the household, water temperature, and EC. So we can get the best signal out of those 4 parameters. That's why we built the analytics for just those 4 parameters. In a situation in which maybe the field doesn't have an EC meter, electrical conductivity meter, or water temperature meter, we can also just roll it back to the 2 basic parameters, FRC at tap stand and household. So really the imperative was to minimize the data collection burden. Now, with the research we're doing, we're trying to figure out how we can also integrate other water handling behaviors, practice other factors into the analytics. And that really is the power of the ANN. We can expand the ANN to accommodate any number of variables, and it'll look for what is the signal in the data. The other thing to bear in mind is that this is a data-driven approach, which means that whatever factors are driving chlorine decay in the post-distribution period are going to be captured in the data, right? They're going to be captured in the change between the tap stand and the household. So if there are a lot of unclean containers in a particular camp, there's a lot of hand dipping or not covering the container, we're going to see that in a substantial decay between tap stand and household. That's going to be reflected in the decay that the SWOT models are able to capture. As conditions improve, if there are new containers, if people undertake jerry can cleaning campaigns, if there's improvement on water handling practices, that'll be reflected in the data, and the target will adjust. So one thing we're integrating into version 2 is also not just the chlorination recommendation, but what are the other things you can do to protect the safe water chain, and providing resources on an on-demand, as-needed basis to help practitioners identify where are the vulnerabilities in the safe water chain and what can you do to help better protect it. So that's a very broad question about how water handling behaviors are integrated into the SWOT. I hope that answers it, Jenny. But if there's any further questions, we'd be happy to answer that. And it's a hugely important factor in chlorine decay. So thank you for raising that question.
Great, thanks for the really structured answer. Thank you. Well done, team. Really fascinating tool and approach.
Thank you, Jenny.
Imran, there's a question from Raphael about whether having some kind of hygiene status scale would be beneficial for the accuracy of the SWOT.
That's a fantastic question, Raphael. Thank you for posing that. So as I mentioned, when we initially did this work in South Sudan, Jordan, and Rwanda, our goal was to simply build a new set of evidence-based targets for chlorination to supplement or to replace the single target that we have all seen in the SPHERE guideline, in the MSF Public Health Engineering Manual, and the UNHCR manual. All the existing manuals on water safety give us a single chlorination target. And that's meant to be applied anywhere in the world. And as we know, it's not based on direct evidence from the field. So we start collecting this evidence in these different camps to start building a suite of recommendations. What we found was that the two strongest factors for determining chlorine decay were the temperature conditions at the setting. So hot conditions have much greater decay than cooler conditions, and the ambient sanitary conditions. So the ambient wash conditions in the field. If there's a lot of open defecation, if there's very little water supply in the camp, if there's lack of access to soap, you're going to have a lot of domestic and environmental contamination that's going to drive chlorine decay after the water leaves a tap. It's very unprotected in a very unhygienic environment, right? So we actually created a rubric to determine which kind of guidelines should you use based on the temperature conditions and the wash conditions at the field. And the wash conditions were determined as a proxy. How many of the SPHERE indicators for water supply, sanitation, hygiene were met or not met at that site? When we moved away from a set of standardized guidelines to site-specific guidelines, we didn't need to do that anymore, because whatever hygienic conditions are in play at the field are being captured in the monitoring data and how chlorine is changing between tap stand and consumption. So we don't have that anymore. However, as I mentioned, with the growing data set and these big data opportunities for looking at how does chlorine decay vary globally, one of the big factors we expect to see when we're doing the analysis now is temperature, and the local wash conditions will strongly determine that decay. So we're looking at that again. We're creating proxies for what are the wash conditions in the field, and that can help. Let's say you're starting at a new site, and you can tell the SWOT then what is your temperature condition at this site? Is it hot? Is it cool? Is it moderate, etc.? And what are your current wash indicators? Like how well is the wash service level in the camp? Using that input data, we can then pull from other existing sites. What has the decay been like to bootstrap the model? So you don't need to get 100 samples per se. You can probably pull in some data from other sites. So we're working on that feature now. That's a version 3 feature, but it's certainly something we're thinking about. We know for a fact that local environmental conditions strongly control chlorine decay, and it's something that we're bringing into the tool as well. But at the moment, we don't need to do that because all that figures into the data you collect and integrate it, upload into the SWOT anyway. So thank you, Raphael, for that question. I see another question here from Damien. Are there specific criteria for when you should take a sample? Does the original storage time impact the ability of the tool to accurately analyze the data? That's a fantastic question. James, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so in terms of when you're setting up your kind of data collection, your monitoring schedule, it's really great to have an idea of the kind of length of time that's representative of household storage in general across the site. So that amount of time is going to give you the ability to really kind of contextualize the analysis, the way the analysis works. And that's going to be needed by the analysis tool to help you set the storage time that the analysis is working on. So what happens, we have some templates, we have some guides available online, which helps you take that storage time, for example, 15 hours, and translate that into a set of schedules for data collection. And what the aim of the data collection is not necessarily to take all your samples at that maximum storage time, but to have a range of storage times within that. So it can be kind of more formal or less formal, depending on the way your data collection is set up.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add to what we've seen based on previous studies from Bangladesh to Nigeria, Tanzania, South Sudan, and Rwanda, is that there's sort of a typology of 3 periods of household storage. People in a typical camp setup, at least. So if people collect water in the morning, if they're in a very acute, have lack of supply, they tend to use it fairly quickly. And by the afternoon, they're done. So maybe within 6 to 9 hours, that's sort of the minimum duration that people are storing and using water in the household. If they do that, then they also have to collect water in the afternoon when tap stands are on again and store it through the night and then use it in the morning. So that's about a 15 to 18 hour duration. And then where the water supply is plentiful, people are able to collect it and store it and use it for long periods of time. The maximum we usually see is people collect in the morning, store and use it the whole day until the next morning. So that's about a 24-hour period of storage. So we're developing really quick tools that field users can use to just, doing a walk through the community, talk to a few people, look at people's houses, how many containers they have, ask them how long they've been storing the water for. You can figure out like what we're concerned with, what is the maximum typical duration, right? If people are collecting in the afternoon and using the next morning, then you want to, optimize for 15 hours or so. But if people have to store for longer, then you want to go up to 24. I hope that answers the question there. Okay, so there's another question from Mary Angela. Thank you again. So is the app linked or can be linked to a mapping app? And I believe GPS points are taken. Thank you. So in the current version 1, we don't have the functionality, but we are the data has it. You're absolutely right. Geo coordinates on it. So we could hypothetically build in spatial analysis components. That's a version 3 feature that we're thinking about now. We haven't formalized how we're going to develop it. The other opportunity that the spatial aspect would allow us to do is actually model the chlorine decay within the distribution network. So between the point of chlorination as an inline chlorination or in batch chlorination, and then as it waits in storage tanks and then is transmitted via pipelines to the tap stand, we could model that process as well with spatial data. So this is something that we intend to do in version 3, but we're not currently doing. And thank you so much for raising these points, because they're helping us to identify where are the needs and functionalities amongst users.
Great. So there's a question from Jacob about the study in Jordan, whether it was done with household level water supply or network water tracking.
Right, so I'll take that question. That was a traditional water supply system. So we looked from the tap stand to the household. However, you're absolutely right. There was that period before distribution from the tap stand back to the storage tank. We did not optimize that. There was also water trucking. So their water was originally abstracted from a groundwater field subject to reverse osmosis and inline chlorinated, then transmitted to the camp, about half an hour or so, and then deposited into the water storage tanks. So you're absolutely right. That whole journey between the initial point of chlorination and eventually somebody's cup in the camp, that's all stuff for us to optimize. So far, we've only been looking from the tap stand to the household, right? The reason we've been looking there is because our current guidance is structured around what is a FRC target you should deliver at the tap stand. So we're trying to adjust that first. We leave it up to the user on a trial and error basis presently to figure out how much they need to adjust their inline chlorination in order to achieve that target at the tap stand. However, the analytics in principle can also be applied to the whole journey of water. So we're working now with HIF and Tufts University on implementing it for water trucking and evaluating its effectiveness in this situation. So stuff we're working on now, we haven't done it yet, but we will by the end of this year hopefully have more clarity on how can the SWAT be used to optimize chlorination and water trucking as well. Fantastic. So I just want to pose it to the audience again. If there are particularly if there are barriers you feel to implementing the SWAT, what would those be? What would the challenges, stumbling blocks, roadblocks be? And then maybe we can think about how we can help make that journey easier, what kind of inputs we can provide to overcome those barriers. So if there are any questions on that, I'll leave it to the text box to come in. In the meanwhile, James, would you mind just advancing to the next slide there? and to the file. Yeah, perfect. So I just want to flag for the users the website is safeh2o.app. So you can go online there if you're interested in learning more. You can see the research that underlies the analytics of the tool. You can get, there's a couple of videos on there for how to what the SWOT does and how it works. We're developing a suite of user videos. We have a YouTube channel as well that provides guidance to users on how to collect data, how to upload it to the SWOT, how to interpret the report. And I'll also add that, you know, James and I are here to support teams in the field implementing it, so we can work one-to-one with field teams to understand what is your supply situation in the camp, what part can you intervene in to optimize the water safety chain? What is your current water quality monitoring program, and how can you adapt it just slightly to work with the SWOT as well? And the real opportunity here is that, you know, we're expending a huge amount of effort in collecting water quality data, usually just at the tap stand, at the point of delivery for reporting purposes. But with the small adjustment to also look at the household, we can gain so much operational insight. So really, James and I are here to understand what you're currently doing in the field and what small adaptations can you make to gather this operationally effective and impactful data using the SWOT. I see a few additional questions have come in. Great. So Damien asks, what were the barriers identified in the original pilots? That's a great question. A number of things came up. One thing was that it's because we were based at a university, although we're experienced water and sanitation wash people from the field itself. I worked with MSF for several years. James has worked with Oxfam for many years. Because we're coming from the university and we're talking about data, a lot of people saw us as being research instead of as being sort of part and parcel of a routine monitoring program, a quality improvement initiative. So that's a sort of a framing thing that we have learned to, it could be a barrier, and we're working with people to really communicate, you know, this is part of routine monitoring. We're here to support you deliver your mission of getting safe water to people where they're drinking it and protecting public health. So that's a framing question we've ran into before. Another challenge has been taste or odor, and it often comes up anytime we talk about chlorination. You know, there certainly is a concern that if you increase chlorination levels, you're going to get rejection issues and people turn to potentially unsafe sources in the field. We don't have a lot of good data on what that threshold is. And what we do know is that it's highly population specific. So people who have had experience drinking chlorinated water before in their homes, where they came from, or who have been received hygiene and health promotion activities about why chlorination is done, they have much higher levels of acceptance of chlorinated water than people who maybe came from, you know, drinking spring sources that were unchlorinated, have just newly arrived in the settlement. There's all these factors at play that determine people's acceptance level, right? And we see, you know, certain places have very high acceptance levels and some places have very, very low acceptance levels. What we do know from the research is that those acceptance thresholds can be do change with time and can be encouraged to change through health promotion and hygiene promotion activities, and explaining why we're doing chlorination, what it means, why it's an indicator of water safety. So they can be adjusted. And the really key thing is to understand what is that upper limit, that threshold for the population that you're working with. Ultimately, safe water supply, as James mentioned at the outset, is a balancing act between two boundaries. You know, at the bottom, you have to have the minimum amount of chlorine to protect the water in order to achieve the public health goal of the water being actually safe to drink and protected from pathogens. That's the minimum. That's what the SWOT currently helps you figure out. But at the maximum is that threshold after which people will just reject the water, turn to unsafe sources. So we're now developing the tools that field implementers can use to quickly determine on a population specific basis at a field level, what is your local threshold for different segments of the population? And that's work that we're currently doing with Tufts. And that will be included into the SWOT toolkit towards the latter half of this year as well.
Thanks,
so I
Imran.
think, those are the two big barriers I think we've encountered.
Just maybe to add something to that. So I think in terms of the barriers for using the tool and the barriers for turning the kind of information from the tool into actual improvements in the field, maybe to touch on Damien's question, but also Mariangela's about how do we integrate feedback and accountability into this. And really, I think the tool is there, and as we said, we're confident that it works, that it produces great data. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity around producing guidance and providing support for organizations to really be able to interpret this data and to make sure that they've got the kind of processes that they need in place, both to communicate to beneficiaries and users about what the water quality levels are and what are the risks, but also around how do we improve safe water chain in general. How do we potentially increase the margin between acceptance for taste and odor and safety by reducing potentially that FRC decay through whether that's kind of behavior change communication, whether that's around changing the jerry cans or whatever that we're using. And so I think a really exciting part of this project for me is about developing all of the guidance around safe water chain that we can support you guys and implement it in the field to really integrate this as a kind of toolkit that's a lot more holistic than just a single tool.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. So I see another question here from John Fitzgerald. I'm just going to quickly read it out and summarize it. It seems really applicable for early onset situations, i.e. a new camp setup or camps that experience public health crises. If applied as designed, how quickly can improvements be observed if the SWOT analysis data is applied in these critical situations? So from the 3 case studies, how much time and tinkering did it take the implementers before FRC levels were able to be stabilized to optimal levels? So that's a fantastic question. That's a very much, it gets the operational heart of the matter. We saw a great deal of variability, in fact. So in situations where the team, there's 2 factors, I think. If the team was experienced enough on how to manage the chlorination system, and if the system was itself not highly complex or messy, then it's very quick to implement. They have a very good control on how they're chlorinating at the doser. They can adjust it within a day or 2. You could be achieving your desired target level. And of course, as you collect data, we can very clearly see on those histograms that James had showed earlier in the reports in the SWOT, how well you're achieving your target at your tap stands, right? And we generally see like a normal distribution around the target. How tight that distribution is a function of these 2 factors: experience of the team and the messiness of the system. In certain situations, and this is probably one of the barriers that also, going back to one of the questions earlier, certain situations in camps, particularly where there's a new crisis, where there's the water system is growing in fits and bursts, different pieces are coming together, where you have multiple water sources mixing. So you have some water trucking coming, you have some surface water being treated, you have a groundwater field, and it's all intersecting at a couple of water storage tanks. Hugely varying chlorine demand in the water, hugely varying residence times, hugely varying network links. All these factors and make it very hard to discreetly control the chlorination level at the tap, since you wind up with a much wider dispersion of your target, a much wider normal Gaussian curve. So it really depends on those 2 factors. What we can do is work with the team to help understand where the system is and how to adjust the chlorination level. But ultimately, it's going to, the degree to which it can be achieved is a function of the system in place. And we can generate the target, but it's an operational question how easily it is to achieve given the topology of the system. James, did you want to add something as well?
No, not to that one. I was just going to respond to Jenny's question about how do we kind of make this more strategic in settings where we have different NGOs working, which is a great question. I think this is something that we've definitely discussed in the development of version 2 and planning for version 3, is how do we bring in, or how do we use the kind of results platform in the SWOT web tool as a kind of hub or a dashboard for multi-agency coordination. So how can we maybe bring some of that information to a dashboard that could be shared, for example, at a cluster level or at a subcluster or even a kind of site coordination level. How can we really integrate that that information in a way that's really operationally relevant and can be shared across different organizations? And I think this, it's also interesting to think about the use case where we have potentially, Reach or another third-party monitoring or assessment organization that's doing the data collection. It doesn't have to be necessarily the specific organization doing the chlorination, collecting the data. So we're exploring some of those ways of making this more into a kind of coordination and shared information platform for those kind of contexts. So watch this space.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, James. So as James mentioned, this is a version 2 functionality. So we expect by June, this will be live to be able to integrate into these different arrangements of working of sharing data, allowing visibility across partners. The version 1 tool we have now is relatively straightforward. It's a prototype tool. You upload the data, it gives you a recommendation, and then you can see whatever all the historic record of data for that particular site you're assigned with. But by June, we'll be able to support that kind of cluster or platform coordination as well. Okay. I'll just give a few more seconds if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. We were wondering what kind of turnout we get, and I'm very, very pleased to say we were up to 50 people at a peak, and I hope we got 50 new users. So please feel free to reach out to us, hello@safeh2o.app. Really, James and I are here, like 100%, it's our job to build a tool and to support field users on implementing it. So we're here to support you in any way you need. We have guidances, we have kit lists, we have guides on how to train your team. We can set up calls, video chats to work with your field level data collectors to explain the whole process to them. So we're really here 100% of the time to help support you and delivering water to the people who need it at the point that they drink it. So that's our mission, and we're here to support you with that as well. So please check out the website. You can add us on Twitter. We're adding project updates, live updates there, and please sign up. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great rest of the satellite event week, and we look forward to working with you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'll just add, if there are any questions remaining that you want to speak to James and I one-to-one on, we're here for the next 6 minutes until the next session. So feel free to hang on and just message us in the chat. We'll be here for the next 6 minutes until the next session. James, do you know if the Zoom saves the chat, I'd really like to save the comments folks gave because there's some good ideas on new functionalities and feedback or things to think about for us. Do you know what Zoom does with the chat?
I'm not sure. I think you do end up with a text file.
Okay. So either you or I should get that as the host of the meeting, yeah?
It's recording into the cloud.
Okay.
So it should be on the Zoom account.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, super valuable feedback for folks.
Yeah, that was excellent.
What's the next session, by the way?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Nutrition and wash. Oh, and the water e-compendium is at 10. Exciting.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool.
It was very early for you guys.
The lighting conditions in my room have changed immensely since when we started. It was very dark this
You're
morning.
lucky, mine haven't.
East Coast, eh?
There's always weather.
Yeah. It's very, very British Isles in that sense, huh? Always weather, always something in the sky.
So apparently you can, I haven't used Zoom for a long time.
Yeah, the problem with Zoom chat is that you can't actually copy out from the chat box.
No, I experienced that. I was in private contact with one of MSF mate, and he gave me his new email address because now he's working with ACF. But you can't copy from the chat. Oh, you copied the entire thing. So
right,
that's a little bit annoying.